All the neighbors heard loud barking and shouting. Alarmed by the situation, they went to see what was happening. Some even brought weapons, and when they arrived, they could not believe their eyes. The last funeral procession was heading to the burial place. There, a couple of children, who apparently had some family connection with the deceased, did not realize what was happening. So they ran happily through the cemetery. The adults, distracted by their grief, did not pay attention to the fact that the children had separated from them. The boys were looking at the graves with interest, and suddenly they noticed a dog on one of them. Confused by such a scene, they did not hesitate to call it. The dog only moved its ears and looked at them with indifference. The miners tried to approach, but the dog raised his head and growled. He did not allow them to approach. "It is useless." The boys were startled by the sudden raspy voice of a woman behind them. "His master is buried there and he won't leave of his own free will." As they turned to see who it was, they noticed a scruffy-looking stranger. She was a homeless woman who had a bag of food she was able to collect in the cemetery. Food from the small gatherings the visitors made. Then she approached the animal, put something to eat, and then walked away. "They call him Sergeant," said the lady, who was starting to eat a sandwich, but seeing the children's interest, she sat down on a bench and started to tell them about the dog. "Sergeant is a lonely dog, an incomprehensible animal. He doesn't let anyone pet him, although he was probably once friendly, but now he might snap if someone tries to chase him away. At first, people were very afraid of him even though they tried to feed him because they felt sorry for him. Not long ago, his owner was buried and since that day the dog did not want to move from the grave. Now he looks calm, but before he was howling, barking and crying as if he was asking his owner to get up. But the way his owner died was a terrible sight," the woman said quietly. The children shuddered, looking fearfully at the homeless woman as if she was going to tell them a horror story. Perhaps they expected the dead to rise from their graves. However, that fact took a different path, full of pain. Sergeant, a huge dog, probably the size of a wolf, imposing and with a growl that made one think he was dangerous, never dared to bite someone. Indeed, he could attack but didn't. He just didn't want to be taken away from his owner. In fact, he was a policeman, and as soon as people heard how he died, they were afraid to chase it, but one day someone dared to call the dog Pound. Sergeant seemed to sense that they would come for him, and when people arrived, he was nowhere to be found. Then people found out that the dog had hidden in a barn away from the cemetery, and when he sensed that no one would look for him, he began to return to the grave only late in the afternoon when most of the residents were leaving the cemetery. No one bothered him. He continued to suffer in solitude. The truth now is no longer howling or barking. He seemed to understand that this was useless, but still, the faithful canine could not forget his owner and stayed with him all night long. And the relatives of the policeman, they asked, they don't need any more trouble, they didn't even try to take him away. "And what did the officer die of?" questioned a boy looking at a photo of a relatively young man on the tombstone. While judging by the photo he was only 40 years old, he died according to the beggar girl under strange circumstances. The boys fell silent and prepared to hear a fascinating and mysterious story, but the stranger disappointed them with her answer. "They found him hanging in the woods." "Poor him, he must have been depressed," she said calmly, and then fell silent. Suddenly they heard that someone began to call the children. It turned out that the father of one of them had noticed their absence and was shouting for them in the cemetery. The boys ran away frightened. The homeless woman stood watching them. Winter came, and no matter how cold it was, the dog was still on the grave. During the day, the locals who knew he was hiding in a barn brought him food, and in the cemetery people also took care of him, so he didn't starve. He just continued to be sullen with people. Time passed, the snow began to melt, but the cold continued. There was also a lake near the cemetery. There was almost no ice, and consequently some fishermen went there. One night, Sargent heard an engine that kept him alert at the moment the dog felt that something was wrong, then he observed the van that was going very slowly, perhaps not to attract attention with the noise of the engine. Neither had the headlights on, the night was illuminated by the moon, and the road was clearly visible. So 2 men got out of the vehicle, quickly opened the trunk and took out a large black bag and began to drag it to the water. "Come on, hurry up," said one to the other. "You walk like a turtle." "Don't get smart," replied the other. "I took care of the hardest part and on top of that you complain. Besides, remember that I have an injured leg. Don't get angry." "We can't stay here for long," answered the friend. But suddenly he gave a shout, dropped the bag, and began to fight against the dog who grabbed him by the hand. But the more he pushed him away, the more he tensed his jaw and growled with rage. The second man was confused. Without letting go of part of the bag, he thought it was a wolf that came out of the forest. That he was surprised and was not able to react immediately to what was happening. Meanwhile, the first one took out a knife and started stabbing the dog. As a result, the canine finally let him go, but went on top of the other man. The one with the knife complained about his bloody hand and was unable to help his friend who had injured leg. And only when the other guy started screaming did he come to his senses. The man tried to attack the dog again with the knife, but the dog avoided him by biting his arm. "Get him away from me," he shouted the guy. Sargent threw himself first to one and then to the other. Even though he was bleeding, he still had strength. The men were trying not to make so much noise, but their screams attracted attention. People began to flock to the noise as there was a forest nearby. Some hunters among the locals took their weapons as they knew that sometimes wild animals attacked people. Seeing that it was Sargent dealing with a stranger, people sided with the dog. At one point they thought the dog became aggressive, but they thought he would not have left his owner's grave if something stronger had not happened. And so it did. Sargent lay on the ground bleeding and moaning in pain, looking at the lake. The dog remembered a similar scenario. Once when he was just a puppy, he was put in a bag and thrown into the river, then his late owner saved him. The puppy didn't understand why he was put in a bag. He was afraid, but then he met the warm hands of a stranger. The canine shivered from the cold, looking confused at the man who put him on his chest to safety. That's how the puppy got a new home, a proper name, and a kind owner who took care of him. Sargent had grown up a lot, but even this didn't scare the owner. Although his faithful friend was not a purebred dog, he was loved. Sargent looked very much like a German shepherd. Half floppy ears, big paws, and tail wagging happily when he met his owner. A little funny but very intelligent. For the man was like his own son. The dog could not accept the loss of his owner. He continued to be faithful to him even in death. But when he saw how 2 men were dragging something into the water, Sargent remembered how he found himself in that situation. Immediately, he realized that the bag contained a person who was in danger. Leaving his place, he ran to save him. The people who came to the noise found 2 badly injured men, a dog with cuts and a large black bag that was moving. The hunter pointed his gun at the subjects while the others rushed to open the bag. It turned out that the bandits tried to drown the old man. His name was Nikolai, a resident of another city who came to fish in the wrong place at the wrong time. You see, when Nikolai arrived in the town, he left the vehicle next to a local store and preferred to walk on foot. Taking a fishing rod, he headed to the lake. He did not get warm enough. The sun turned out to be deceptive, and after catching a couple of fish, he got cold. However, he decided not to return home immediately. He wanted to go deeper into the forest, and there he met two men who were sitting by a campfire. Nikolai was a sociable man. He asked their permission to sit with them to take some warmth and at the same time exchange a few words. At first they talked normally, then the old man gave a hint about his vehicle and somehow the guys started asking about the van. They wanted to find out in which store he had left it. At first the old man did not suspect anything wrong about it and told them, but those guys suddenly looked at him angrily. Nikolai decided that it was better to get out of there. Maybe he had said something bad. He started to say goodbye, and then one of the men jumped on him and started a fight and got hit hard on the head. Now the old man woke up in a bag, heard a big commotion, and then they took him out. You see, those convicts were fugitives and dangerous. Having met them, Nikolai had affirmed his own death sentence. These were going to finish him off and profit from whatever they found, and to their delight they realized that the car could serve them to escape. They found out where he left his car, then they stunned him, rummaged in his pockets and planned to drown him. Before it got dark, one of them found the van, drove it to where his friend and the old man were. They also cooked the fish that Nikolai had gotten. They seemed to be celebrating what had happened. The old man showed no signs of life. At first, they thought to leave him there, but they decided to finish him once and for all. So they wrapped his body in bags they found in the car and took him to the lake to leave him there. However, they never expected to find a dog. Finally, Nikolai was saved, and as for a sergeant, they thought he was not going to resist, but the man wanted to take him to the vet. He could not let him die, even though the locals told them it was better for him. He is still very attached to the owner, so it will be better for him. Poor dog. Less torment anyway. He will come running to the grave and die of grief, commented a neighbor. A hunter even offered to shoot him to end his suffering. But Nikolai did not want to listen to anyone. Even if Sergeant decided to return to the cemetery, he was going to take care of him. However, after recovering, the dog no longer tried to return to the grave of his deceased owner. Apparently, he let him go and in return found a new one who was grateful to him for saving him. The criminals were arrested and sent back to prison. During the investigation, it turned out that they were to blame for the death of the policeman, Sergeant's owner, who accidentally stumbled upon the men's tracks. He had no shelter, so he decided to search the woods, but the fugitives found him first and hanged him, making it appear that the officer decided to end his life. The case would have remained closed had no personal belongings of the policeman been found with the convicts. As a result, they were forced to confess everything. Sergeant avenged his owner in an incident that helped to find the criminals. Yes, the dog apparently was just waiting for the day when he could be useful. Apparently, the owner from beyond the grave wanted justice and finally made sure that his friend was in good hands. He went to heaven, and Sergeant, sensing this, finally calmed down. Many believed he would spend the rest of his life in the grave. Fortunately, he just waited for the right time. No doubt a touching story. Animals will never stop surprising us. Don't you think so?